here with MijiStyle.com, and today we're going to be working on a new sew along as part of my Simplicity Summer Pattern 8394. Now if you're new to sewing or you want to learn to sew, make sure and visit my other site, sewitacademy.com, where we teach you how to sew from beginning to end. Now if you just need a refresher course, you can just click the link in the description box below, watch that video, and then come back and follow along with me. Okay, now we're moving on to view B, which is our ruffle skirt. You're going to need an invisible zipper at least 7 to 9 inches long, and the following pattern pieces. You're going to need pattern piece number 10, which is the back facing. You're going to need pattern piece number 9, which is the front facing. You're going to need pattern piece number 12, which is the back ruffle. Pattern piece number 11, which is the front ruffle. And you're going to need pattern piece number 7 and 8, which is our skirt front and our skirt back. Okay, we're going to start with our front. So the front of the skirt, I want you to go ahead and make your darts and give them a good press. Now we're going to place them with right sides facing, and you have 2 double notches in your center front. So you want to make sure and pin there. And then pin at the top. And then you should have one large dot here. This is where we're going to stop because our front skirt has a slit, and you're going to pin there. And now we're going to sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, starting at the dot and sewing our way up. Okay, now starting at the dot, I'm going to backstitch. I want you to go ahead and press this seam open. Now go ahead and set your front aside and grab your 2 back pieces. What we're going to do is we're going to stitch this together and we're going to attach our invisible zipper. So I want you to pin your center back. Make sure that your notches are aligned. You should have one single notch there. Now what we're going to do, because we're doing an invisible zipper, and I've done this many times before, you can see it in just about any video that has a zipper that I've done. We're going to start at the bottom, and using a regular length stitch, we're going to stitch all the way up until we get to our dot or our notch. This is where the zipper is going to end. Then we're going to switch from a regular length stitch to a basting stitch, and we're going to stitch from that dot all the way up. Okay, starting at the bottom, we're going to backstitch. I'm using a normal 2.5 length stitch. Okay, I've reached my notch. I'm going to backstitch. And I'm going to switch to a basting stitch. Now before you put in our zipper, I want you to go ahead and press the seam open. Okay, now working with just the seam allowance, the entire skirt is to the left of me. I'm going to place my invisible zipper down. So the wrong side of the zipper is facing up. And I'm going to make sure that that I have my zipper so that the zipper pull is far away from my presser foot so it's not in the way. That's why I use an extra long zipper. And I'm going to make sure that the center of my zipper is along my seam line. And before I change my zipper foot, I'm going to use my regular foot just to baste this down. I'm going to baste my zipper tape down. I'm going to turn this around, making sure that I'm only working on my seam allowance. I'm going to stitch down the other side. Now I'm going to remove my basting stitch. We're going to stop where we switch stitches. So wherever we went from the 2.5 to the 5, that's where you're stopping. Remove any loose threads, and now you can go ahead and open up your zipper. And because we want it out of the way, I'm going to try and put it inside. And you can use your seam ripper to help push your zipper out of the way. And now we're going to switch to our zipper foot. Make sure you're using a regular length stitch. And now we're going to sew close to our zipper teeth by pulling our coils open. Back stitch. And you're going to do the other side. Now go ahead and pull your zipper back up. And you're all done. Okay, now that we've installed our invisible zipper, we're going to lay our front over our back. And we're going to pin our side seams. And you're going to pin the other side. Now go ahead and go to the sewing machine and you're going to stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to sew both sides the same way. Once your side seams are sewn, you can set this aside for just a sec. We're going to work on our facing, on our waistband facing. So what we're going to do is we're going to place these right sides facing. Make sure that you are matching your side notches. You're going to go ahead and sew using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then we're going to attach this to our waistband. Okay, now that you have your waistband facing done, we're going to go ahead and pin it to our skirt. So I'm going to pin at my side seams first. Right sides are facing. I'm going to pin once in the middle. And then I want you to open the zipper out when you pin. And now of course you should be finishing your seam allowances as you're going and finishing the edge, bottom edge of your waistband. We don't do any of the serging and finishes just for the sake of the tutorial to try and keep it as fast as possible. But you should be finishing all of your seam allowances and also finishing the edge of your waist facing. Now we're going to go ahead and stitch along the top using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and then we're going to stitch down the side so that we can encase this zipper opening and then around the top. Okay, using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, we're going to stitch. Back stitch at the beginning, back stitch at the end. Now we're going to stitch down the sides, so back stitch. Make sure you don't sew through your zipper. And do the other side. Go ahead and trim your corner and trim off your zipper. Okay, once our waist facing is in, you can go ahead and set your skirt aside for 1 second. We're going to work on our ruffle. We have our back ruffle, which is cut on the fold. And then we have our front ruffle. And so I want you to go ahead and pin at the sides, matching that notch. And go ahead and stitch using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, so once we have our sides, we have our entire ruffle put together, then all we need to do is to gather the top of our ruffle. Now, I don't know about you, but I hate gathering, always have. And so I recently came across something that I thought was the coolest thing ever, so I'm going to be using it. You can, however, do 2 rows of basting stitches to gather the top of your ruffle. But I'm just going to show you this because I think it's cool. It's by Nancy Zeman, and it's called Fuse and Gather, and it's an iron-on tape that gathers. So as you can see, when I fuse it on, you just iron it on, and it already has 2 rows of stitching. And then you pull the 2 threads, and then as you pull, it gathers and it makes it so much easier. So this is what I'm going to be using. I'm going to go ahead and gather my skirt. Go ahead and gather yours. And then once it's all gathered, we're going to go ahead and attach our ruffle to our skirt. Okay, now that I'm finished gathering, I went ahead and pinned it to the bottom of my skirt, right sides facing, of course. And we're going to stitch around using 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Okay, we're going to backstitch to the beginning. Now press your seam allowance up towards the skirt. Now once you have the ruffle attached to the bottom, all that's left for you to do is to finish the hem. So you could do a double fold along the front, right, because we have that split. It'll continue down to your ruffle and then all the way down the bottom of your hem, and then of course up the other side, and you're all done. I hope you've enjoyed this sew along. Make sure to tag me at Mimi G Style so I can see all your beautiful creations. Until next time, peace.